Good evening, folks. Imagine the hiss of a radio, the soft crackle that makes every voice feel a little older, a little wiser. Picture the year 1938, the country still carrying the weight of hard times, faces lined with worry, hands calloused from long days. Into that hush wrote a story that sounded like a fairy tale and felt like a promise. This is the story of Seabiscuit, not a sleek legend born to glory, but a common horse who became a beacon for a generation that needed one. Visuals flicker. Breadlines, unemployed men, dusty farms, newspapers screaming of recession. The narrator voice is warm, steady, intimate. People needed something to believe in. They needed proof that the overlooked could rise. Into this hunger stepped a plain bay horse with a crooked gait and a stubborn heart. Seabiscuit's beginnings were humble. He was small for a racehorse, gangly in a way that made breeders wrinkle their noses. His stride was odd, his attitude indifferent. Many who saw him saw only flaws: too slow, too lazy, too ordinary. He changed hands, more often than horses usually do. And his price remained low. But sometimes low price hides the possibility that someone else might see. Charles Howard, a man who had made his fortune selling cars and who carried a steady, practical optimism, bought Seabiscuit for what most would call a pittance. Howard saw more than a horse, he saw a chance. Howard didn't place Seabiscuit with the established trainers who chased pedigrees and perfect gaits. Instead, he turned the horse over to Tom Smith, a soft-spoken, unconventional trainer who understood that horses, like people, had moods and histories. Smith's approach was patient and observant. He looked for rhythm rather than force. He treated Seabiscuit as an individual with quirks rather than a machine to be fine-tuned. The trainer's quiet confidence was the kind of steady hand that can help a stubborn spirit find direction. Into this mix came Red Pollard, a jockey whose life had been battered by blows, both literal and figurative. He was scarred, a little wild, and carried his own share of hardship. Red and Seabiscuit were both outsiders, one a rider who'd been knocked down by fate, the other a horse who'd been written off before he had a chance. The bond that formed between them wasn't the stuff of rehearsed scenes. It grew slowly, in the small, uncelebrated moments where trust is tested and earned. Pollard learned the horse's moods. Seabiscuit learned to respond to Pollard's touch and timing. Together they started to morph from a ragged pair into a team. Training scenes shift to sequences of dirt flying, hooves churning, the rhythmic slap of shoes on track. Under Tom Smith's patient tutelage and Red Pollard's gritty riding, Seabiscuit began to change. He wasn't suddenly transformed into a perfect athlete. Instead, through repetition and understanding, he grew confident. He learned where to push, when to cruise, how to conserve energy and when to unleash it. His gait smoothed out, not because he was forced into a mold, but because he learned to run in his own way. The way that fit him best. It's a lesson that resonates beyond the racetrack. Success often comes when patience allows strength to find its own shape. Race by race, that shape became clearer. Seabiscuit started to win smaller races, then larger ones. People in the stands began to recognize him. Newspapers started to print his name. In a country hungry for heroes, the horse was simple to understand. He represented resilience, the idea that steady work, careful nurturing, and faith in the overlooked could produce something extraordinary. Fans loved him because his story mirrored their own. They knew what it was to be underestimated. They wanted to see someone prove the doubters wrong. But every compelling story needs stakes, and for Seabiscuit that came in the form of War Admiral. A thoroughbred who seemed sculpted for victory, War Admiral had a pedigree stamped with excellence and a triple crown to his name. He was the embodiment of established superiority, the champion the racing world expected to dominate. War Admiral represented everything Seabiscuit was not: perfect breeding, flawless gait, unquestioned supremacy. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. The decision to pit the two horses against each other was about more than sport. It became symbolic, a test of underdog grit against aristocratic pedigree. Promoters smelled drama, and the public sensed something bigger than a race. Rumors swelled into headlines, and then into a feverish national conversation. People who might never visit a racetrack found themselves riveted. They imagined for a few hours what it might feel like to see the underdog win, to feel the collective triumph of ordinary people reflected in a horse's victory. The chosen stage was Pimlico Racecourse on November 1, 1938. The crowd that day was immense. Well over 40,000 people packed into the stands, with millions more listening by radio. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of anxious tension and hopeful belief. Bets were placed, but more importantly, emotions were on the line. For many listeners across the country, Seabiscuit's race represented the chance for a communal lift. A proof that persistence could overcome birthright. When the race began, it unfolded like a miniature epic. War Admiral surged early with the ease of one bred for dominance. Seabiscuit, ridden low and fierce by Red Pollard, tracked him with calculated patience. As the race progressed, the two closed, stride for stride, and the symmetry of the moment was almost cinematic. Then, with a burst of will that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than muscle, Seabiscuit found another gear. He slipped past War Admiral and pushed ahead, crossing the finish line to an eruption of sound that echoed like relief. It wasn't the largest horse nor the most refined athlete that won that day. It was the horse that had been trained with respect for his nature, ridden by a man who trusted him, and owned by someone who believed in possibility. Victory at Pimlico was more than a sporting triumph. For a country battered by economic hardship, it was a narrative of hope. Newspapers depicted Seabiscuit as a symbol of resilience. Crowds celebrated as if they had won a personal battle. Men and women like the horse found a brief, bright affirmation that struggle could be crowned by success. The image of Red Pollard patting Seabiscuit's neck, Tom Smith standing quietly nearby, and Charles Howard taking a hard-earned moment of pride became iconic. A tableau of determination and quiet dignity. Seabiscuit's story didn't end with a single famous win. He continued to race, to face setbacks, and to defy expectations. He battled injuries, weathered critiques, and still managed to captivate a nation. The horse's career became a chronicle of persistence, of how patient care and belief can coax greatness from unlikely places. Tom Smith's methods, once seen as eccentric, were validated by results. Red Pollard's rough edges became part of his legend, the image of a rider and his horse, both scarred, both resilient, both refusing to yield. More than a sports tale, Seabiscuit's saga touches on how stories shape us. In hard times, people look for narratives that make struggle meaningful. Seabiscuit became more than flesh and bone, he became metaphor. He reminded people that being overlooked isn't the end of the story. He showed that character can outrun pedigree, that a steady, patient approach can prevail over assumptions. The legacy of that season lives on because the themes are universal: resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of second chances. The visuals slow. Seabiscuit in a field at dusk, coat gleaming, wind moving through Maine. The music swells, tender and hopeful. That image captures what Seabiscuit has come to represent. Not merely a racehorse, but a touchstone for anyone who has ever felt underestimated. His story is a simple narrative with complex resonance, a reminder that greatness sometimes arrives quietly, forged through steady practice, compassionate coaching, and a refusal to accept fate's early judgment. When we look back, the human players matter as much as the horse. Charles Howard's belief, Tom Smith's patience, Red Pollard's courage, each brought a piece that Seabiscuit needed. Individually, they might have been ordinary people with flaws and struggles. Together, they became the team that allowed an ordinary horse to reach extraordinary heights. Their combined story reminds us of the power of collaboration, how different strengths, when aligned, can create outcomes none could achieve alone. And so the story ends not with a tidy moral, but with a lingering feeling that hope can appear in unexpected guises. Seabiscuit wasn't polished or perfect, he was raw and real. He raced with a human heartbeat behind him, with people who refused to give up. That's the essence of his legacy. When times are tough, we turn to stories like his because they tell us that perseverance matters, that kindness and wise guidance can change a life's course, and that sometimes the real hero is the one who simply refuses to stop trying. Fade out to black and white. The title card appears. Seabiscuit, a champion for the ages. Jazz plays softly and the radio's gentle crackle lingers, like an echo of an era that found itself in a small horse with a big heart. The tale stays with you, not because he was the fastest or the most flawless, but because he became something far more valuable to a weary nation, a symbol of hope, an emblem of second chances. And a reminder that, in the right hands and with the right spirit, the overlooked can rise to shine.